There was an entrepreneur in Palermo, Libero Grassi, that was killed because he constantly refused to pay Pizzo. And the reason why Libero Grassi refused was because he was aware that Pizzo is not about money, it's about control and power. And he refused his whole life. But then a moment came when his story became unknown on a national level. And instead of creating support, this knowledge provoked isolation.
Welcome back to Wicked Problems. I am Richard Delavan, and oh boy, what a week. So the Trump tariffs are unleashed, and somehow, despite the Donalds saying this was the plan just during the campaign, but for decades, despite him and his crew saying over and over again that when they finally settled on a time, America was great. Turns out it was the Gilded Age in the 1890s. But people didn't quite believe he would do it. People on CNBC were howling as the markets nuked themselves, and grabbed some audio in real time from Restoration Hardware. The company relies on East Asian factories producing antique-looking items at affordable prices as kind of their whole business model. Their CEO kind of broke, slipped up a little bit, as you'll hear, when somebody showed him the stock price and how it had cratered 25% in a couple of hours. Let's just hear that.
Do we have that sound, Bill?
Yeah.
So Gary Friedman's on the call and apparently is notified in the middle of the call that his stock was down 25%. Yeah. Take a listen.
In this race, and where's our stock now? I mean, I guess the stock went down, based on some of the numbers we reported, and then it got killed because of oh really? Oh okay. I just looked at the screen. I hadn't looked at it. It got hit when I think the tariffs came out, and everybody can see in our 10K where we're sourcing from, so it's not a secret, and we're not trying to disguise it by putting everything in an Asia bucket. So you can kind of figure it out and do the math. I think the people really that I feel worse for right now is all the manufacturers in China or people who are invested there. Like that. Move manufacturing, move their lives.
So yeah, people were surprised somehow, and they're still in shock. But they seem determined to kind of stick to either Trump is an idiot take, which is partly how we got here. So please stop doing that. It doesn't matter if he is or not. What matters is what he's doing, why he's been allowed to do it, and how that we got here. And that's the point that people really don't want to grapple with. Or that they're actually just trying to figure out, what is the 4D chess here? And figuring out, what's the economic plan? How is this all going to pan out? And I just think all that's just wrongheaded. And I was glad to see Chris Murphy, U.S. Senator from Connecticut, who was out early, as economists and pundits, kind of elaborated theories about what was the goal here. And people busied themselves figuring out, why was the math like this? And what was those Greek symbols and this fake formula? And was there an AI involved? And we just put up post-apocalyptic memes from the road because, posting those is definitely going to help you figure things out. So here's Chris Murphy. Those trying to understand the tariffs as economic policy are dangerously naive. No, the tariffs are a tool to collapse our democracy. Okay. Means to compel loyalty from every business that will need to petition Trump for relief. This week, you will read many confused economists and political pundits who won't understand how the tariffs make economic sense. That's because they don't. They aren't designed as economic policy. Tariffs are simply a new, super dangerous political tool. And co-sign all that. He's nearly there, though, because there's just a much simpler way to understand what he's doing. Come to that in a second. It's not about economics. It's about political coercion, domestically and internationally. With, some yummy grift, for them thrown in, which Murphy and the FT's Ed Luce and the Bulwark's JVL have kind of been on this for months. This is a bonanza. It just opens up basically the entire trading regime for you got to now bribe me to make the pain stop and compete with each other so that whoever gives me the best offer first is going to get some relief, and maybe I just will never take the relief off from your competitors, and that'll just be an advantage for you. And getting everyone to buy into that game, that is partly the game. If you want a more theoretical bent, there's a great Gillian Tett FT piece today trying to make sense of why blowing up the global trading system designed by and for the United States made any sense by raising the ghost of a long-forgotten economist, Albert Hirschman, author of the book published in 1945, National Power and the Structure of Foreign Trade. And I have a lot of obscure books, but man, I've not heard of them either. But the piece is pretty compelling, and like trying to, figure out, is there any kind of madness to this? And because essentially it's extortion with imperialism. Climate tech is, of course, going to be one of the worst hit as a result of this, which means the energy transition and climate action will also be badly hit as a result of this, at least for a moment. Here's James Temple in MIT Technology Review. Trump's tariffs will deliver big blow to climate tech. Broader economic anxieties and uncertainty over the clean energy subsidies are compounding industry fears. And Carbon Brief, getting ahead of the pack even a couple days ago, assembled a bewildering array of experts to predict the impacts this would have. TLDR, none of it's good. Very little of it's good anyway. I did see George Monbiot making a joke that, well, I guess this is how we get degrowth. Great. And that was before the numbers actually came out. There's just a much simpler way to understand what's going on, though. Donald Trump is a mob boss, and he has decided extortion as imperialism is the way to unchecked power at home and around the globe. Nice economy you got there. It's a shame if something happened to it, as he stands there holding a Molotov cocktail in a lighter. So I put that out, yesterday early online because I just thought, like, people are just not getting the framing here right. They're just wasting a lot of time trying to figure out something that this is designed to not make sense. It's designed to make you waste time thinking about that rather than what's actually going on. And resonate with some people, and I thought, damn, what if that's right? What are we supposed to do about that? Because that's, growing up in New York, in the 80s, watching Godfather and Goodfellas and seeing John Gotti on the cover of the Daily News and the New York Post as the Teflon Don, while that crazy real estate guy who's quietly obviously admiring the Teflon Don, trying to learn a few things. Now we're living in that guy's world. And when you're 14, like, some of these things seem glamorous and exciting, like, oh, guns and, get to do our own stuff and it's our own thing. We're a little band of brothers out there, looking after our family and ourselves, whatever. But it gets a little bit less, glamorous or interesting when you actually, grow up a little bit and you start talking to people who are on the wrong side of that equation, like my uncle, Tom Wallace, who back in the 30s had a sawdust business in the Bronx. So he took worthless or nearly worthless sawdust from lumber mills, from timber mills, and resold it to butcher shops, pubs, bars, theaters, any place that you really, had blood or beer or whatever that you wanted to get soaked up and kind of have a convenient way to sweep it away. And you're not going to have any super extra money for all that disinfectant stuff. You do want to keep the disease down. It was kind of a useful utilitarian way of tackling the problem. Kind of a hard business to get fire insurance for. So after they, built up a lot of this, very exciting, business, and it was doing really well. And sure enough, one day, the local mafiosi enforcer turns up and says, hey, Tom, you know what? I think you need someone to look after your warehouse. And I think we could be the guys to help you out because it'd be a shame, if something happened to it. Like, you're pretty vulnerable. And Uncle Tom, not being a stupid man, understand what was going on. Also was quite a principled and kind of a bit stubborn. Also was quite a bit, pretty young at that time and a little bit hot-headed. And basically told him to fuck off. Which is an instinct that, I think a lot of us would have. Unfortunately, that weekend, predictably, the warehouse burned down. And that was the end of Uncle Tom's dream to be the sawdust king of the Bronx. And that kind of blew apart his life for a while, and didn't do a lot of favors for, the people in his family that had to help him recover. This is in the 30s, mind you. So not a great time to have to be out of work. Your business just burned down. So, standing up to extortion can feel risky. But I wondered if there were examples of people who did that, and whether there's anything we could learn from their example. Might be useful, as boardrooms and national capitals and climate tech entrepreneurs and others scramble to respond, this shakedown. Like, what are you supposed to do? There are two modes, it feels like, of the enough is enough thing. One is, I'm going to try to get pronunciation right, Addiopizzo. If Michael was Italian, he would have used the word pizzo to describe what the mob guy wanted. It wasn't just money. It could be favors. It could be employ my cousin. It could be use only this supplier for whatever, because it's a mobbed up outfit and I'm going to get some kickback back to the organization. Ultimately, it's not about even the money. It's about control. It's about power. Because if you have the power, you can adjust the amount of money. That's just how it works. And if you're, it's about giving obedience to the strong man, to the local guy who tells you the law will not be there to protect you, and then tries to make sure that you believe that. Does that sound familiar? Because it feels like familiar for me what seems to be happening. And so I reached out to this group in Sicily, this nonprofit, Addiopizzo, who basically 20-odd years ago, about 80% of Sicilian businesses were paying the pizzo. They were paying the extortion. They were paying the money. And they wanted to find some way, the other business people, these new people, graduates who were just coming in, young and idealistic, said, well, we don't want this. We have to find some other way of doing it. And in the previous decade, judges and prosecutors and a local businessman had been assassinated by the mafia for standing up to them, for saying no. And so these guys said, well, there must be some other way. If we band together, maybe we can do something. And so we'll get into how that started. But 20-odd years later, they've been a huge success in standing up and, kind of non-violently, slowly, in ways that are not always exciting, but work, finding ways to say, well, we're not going to be part of that system. We only are going to trade with other people who are saying we're not going to pay the pizzo. And, that's built up over time. So I wanted to see if there was anything relevant in their story, from people planning a fight back against all this nonsense, a lesson that could be learned. Because there is another model, of course, that Sicilian history offers. And that would be way back in 1282. A bunch of people from Anjou in France had taken over Sicily a couple of decades earlier, and they were sucking the place dry with taxes, forcing people to unpaid labor, and just thought they could extract whatever they wanted because they were in charge. Does this, again, sound familiar at all? So on Easter Monday in 1282, during evening prayers, a more or less spontaneous revolt broke out, and that led to most of the French who were running the place, like mafia bosses, strung up, stabbed, burned, slashed, driven out. Google Sicilian Vespers if you want to know more. But it did not work out so well for Sicily. Long war followed as other people fought to get control of the place. So there wasn't a magical kind of renaissance of Sicily's prosperity being guaranteed because they got rid of the tyrant. Things just kind of went from there and kind of really didn't get a lot better for a while. So the violence, while it must have felt good at the time, didn't actually get people what they wanted. The patient and sometimes less exciting work of building solidarity and community, holding each other up, that's what Addiopizzo do. So, what it's worth, here's my conversation with Linda Vetrano, speaking for their group, and hopefully, you get some value out of it. And obviously, if you feel so inclined and can help us out at WicProblems.earth, this is a really good time to help support media that are trying to tell these stories in a slightly different way and give angle on this unfolding situation that certainly is going to be consuming a lot of our time, but is also going to be very easy to get wrong in how we're reacting to some of these things, in my opinion. So, for what it's worth, here's my interview.
My name is Linda Vetrano. No titles. I don't like titles. I am part of this movement, as we call it, Addiopizzo. I usually do the joke for English and also not English speaking people that it's pizza with an O at the end. It's not pizza, because sometimes I get the question, that's true. Like, is pizza in any way related to pizza? And my go-to line is always, well, pizza is something we have to celebrate for eternity. It's a great thing. Whereas pizza is something we are actually actively try to make disappear from the face of Earth. So this being said, Addiopizzo is a grassroots movement, which is one of the things that I love the most about this movement. The fact that we found the strength to stick together and try to do something as a community. But I think that before we talk about our movement, it's really needed to say a couple of words of two important topics. What mafia means to us and what pizzo is, because without these two basic information, it's literally impossible to understand what we did and do today. So when we talk about the mafia, it's not just, this is an Italian term that generically describes organized crime that can be of various kinds. Sadly, in Italy, we have more than one organization. We have the Camorra, we have the 'Ndrangheta, and we have the Cosa Nostra in Sicily. Okay, the Sicilian mafia is called Cosa Nostra by themselves. That's not a name that we gave to them. That's the name that the mafiosi themselves gave to the organization. Cosa Nostra literally means our thing. But it's also interesting that it means in Sicilian, it means our business in terms of secrecy. It's something that is just about us. Okay, so it will take too long to give further explanations. Enough to say right now that Cosa Nostra has the feature of having a structure, a hierarchy, and they stick with this hierarchy, which makes them stronger than other criminal organizations. In this situation, one of the features of organized crime, of the mafia in general, is that they exercise power over their territory. So they are Sicilians and they oppress the other Sicilians. That, in very, oversimplified words, the description I can give right now. And when we talk about Cosa Nostra, one of the tools they have been using since forever to exercise power over their community is the use of extortion, which we can define as racketeering, or in more of a slang term, protection money. Well, these descriptions are not quite correct. When we talk about this phenomenon in Sicily, there is a local name that we use, pizzo. That's why our organization is called Addiopizzo, which literally means farewell pizzo. And pizzo is something that it's imposed, like, yes, racketeering and extortion, of course, and it's imposed on local economic operators. Um, as a form of tax, if we may say. But actually, and mind to explain pizza, we will need at least 1 hour to be detailed on the meaning. So please accept the explanation for what it is. Maybe if you or your audience are interested, you can research also on our web at addiopizzo.org about the topic, all right?
We will, of course, put the links in the show notes so people can do that and learn more of the details.
Thank you. Great. In this situation, pizzo is never asked aggressively. At first. Usually, the mafiosi approach economic operators friendly, in a way of giving a suggestion. And it's interesting to know that pizzo is not very often paid with money, is very often paid with services, which means employing specific people in their business or buying specific products. The case, for example, of one of our first economic operators in the network, he was threatened to pay pizzo, but in a very strange way for people that are not used to this kind of strategy. The mafiosi wanted these economic operators owning a bar to place slot machines inside the bar. Of course, with all the consequences of that, the money, of course, would be taken by the mafia, and so on and so on. Uh, Happy to tell you that the economic operators reported to the law enforcement, and the mafiosi were arrested, and he accepted to be in our project. So, in a few words, this exercise of power doesn't aim simply to collect money, it aims to create not loyalty, that's not the correct word, to create a basis of people ready to obey to the mafiosi. Because if you think about it, in the moment they accept what they're told to do, whatever it may be, paying money or employing people and so on, in that moment they acknowledge the mafioso the one thing they're looking for. You are stronger than I am. You have more power than I have. So this is what actually Cosa Nostra looks for when they are asking for pizzo, when they're threatening people to pay pizzo. And of course, yes, money is a great and important portion of this phenomenon. The money will be used to pay their what we call soldiers. So the ones with less power, the money will be used to pay lawyers or to grant an income to the families of the mafiosi sitting in jail. So money is an important part of it, but the final aim, if we may say so, is to impose acceptance, to impose obedience over people. Okay, I hope I was clear in this explanation.
Very clear, very clear. And I think it brings me to my next question, which is how you guys got started. Because as I remember from back in 2004, I think, in Palermo, that your group started, or the forerunner for your group started to put up stickers, basically saying that we're done with this.
These ones.
Perfect. Could you hold that up
I
again?
actually, yes, of course. There is my finger on the name of the organization. This is not one of the originals, okay? Because at the time the stickers were printed anonymously, so that they looked exactly like this one, okay? It's an interesting sticker, but before I explain it, I would like to say an important thing. At the time, to start this operation, if we may call that, it was a group of young people. Today, not young anymore, of course, because 20 years passed by, but they were all, yes, they were all between their 20s and their 30s. And the idea was to put money together and open a business so they will start to, emancipate from their families and so on. And it's exactly while projecting this plan, while thinking about it, that they had to face the question, what will we do when somebody will knock at our door asking for protection money, asking for pizza? And I always share this first question because the interesting word in it is not if somebody knocks at our door, it's when. Okay, so it gives the perception that in this city, in Palermo, we were convinced at the time, even though I wasn't part of this first group of pioneers, but I can agree on the fact that we all thought that if you had a shop, a place open to the public, sooner or later you will be forced to pay. So, I mean, there is an important body in the law, in the justice system that investigates the mafia, that actually publicly reported in 2003 that 80% of the shops in Palermo were paying pizza at the time, which, by the way, to me, as mentioned, was already an optimistic number because the perception was that everybody paid. Well, let me tell you, these numbers have to be taken with a certain, attention because pizza is an underground phenomenon. So this is about 80%. Well, the point is that these friends lived through the terrible facts of 1992 when Falcone and Borsellino were brutally murdered with the bombings, and they participated to the first national march against the mafia that was held here in Palermo. So they lived through those facts. And a few years after, they couldn't accept that despite the rebellion, pizza was still normally accepted. And there is another important fact. In Palermo in 1991, 1 year before this terrible killings and the consequent rebellion of the people. There was an entrepreneur in Palermo, Libero Grassi, that was killed because he constantly refused to pay Pizzo. And the reason why Libero Grassi refused was because he was aware that Pizzo is not about money, it's about control and power. And he refused his whole life. But then a moment came when his story became known on a national level. And instead of creating support, this knowledge provoked isolation. And again, to know more about him, it's maybe easier to check our website or research about Libero Grassi. Yeah. But the point is that these friends at the time in 2004 realized that Libero Grassi was killed by the indifference around him, and they couldn't accept that his sacrifice was forgotten. All these things together led to the idea of provoking Palermo, the citizens, with these stickers. Okay, I don't know if it is possible to read it, but I will translate it directly into Italian, into English.
Say it in Italian. I can get the translation later.
Ok, un intero popolo che paga il pizzo è un popolo senza dignità. An entire population that pays protection money is a population without dignity. Well, in the night between the 28th and the 29th of June 2004, Palermo woke up covered with these stickers. These friends managed, covered a big part of the city with these stickers, provoking actually a great public discussion. To the point that they realized that Palermo was ready, culturally ready to do something against Pizzo, and they created this project. Addiopizzo unofficially started in 2004 with the action of the stickers. I'm oversimplifying again because it took much longer than that. There were other stickering around, if I may say so. Yes. There were other actions that were taken. And finally, they realized that Palermo was ready, and they created two things kind of walked on the same path on parallel lines. They created a petition directed to the local people, asking locals that the question, I'm quoting the question, if there is a shop that doesn't pay pizza and you know that they don't pay for sure, are you willing to go shopping there instead of somewhere else? So you can support these people. The idea is not to forget that Libero Grassi was killed by indifference. So they didn't want to put the contemporary economic operators on the same danger that Libero Grassi was during this time. So the idea was, are the citizens of Palermo really ready to stick on the side of people stepping forward? Mm-hmm. In the meanwhile, when they realized that the petition was collecting enough signatures, they started to literally knock door by door to the shopkeepers, telling them that if they wanted to say publicly that they don't pay protection money and they will never pay protection money, they were not alone. The petition itself collected 3,500 signatures of citizens ready. And finally, in 2006, when we really started with our project, the first pizzo-free list, as we call it, counted 100 brave entrepreneurs. Now, an important thing to say, because when I talk about this topic with people, especially people that are not Italian, the first question coming up is, what was the reaction of the mafia? How comes that these people were so brave to stand up against the mafia? Now, I don't want to take anything away from the courage that these people had. We're still talking about organized crime. But one thing is important to know. After 1992 and 1993, Cosa Nostra decided to abandon the violent strategy that they were using since 20 years, especially during the 1970s and the 1980s, and they went underground, stopping using violence, to the point that people stopped believing that they are still existing, because we were used to them being visible through violence. Right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Without this violence, especially after the rebellion of the people, the strong action of the government, the many arrests, people started to believe that Cosa Nostra has been defeated. Well, that will be a very beautiful news. I wish, we wish, but actually Cosa Nostra still exists. They simply changed their operating mode. They decided that violence wasn't efficient anymore.
And I think that's, I mean, I suppose just given the time, I've got about 5 minutes left before I need to let you go. But I think we wanted to get to kind of zoom forward. And what the organization has done since 2006 is really, again, it seems to me, you tell me if I have this right, that the formula to honor the memory of the Grassi was that, solidarity was going to be important. And that is slowly built in order to encourage other people to see that it's possible to have a different type of future free of this type of control. And that by getting one person at a time, one business at a time to agree to trade with each other and not be part of that system. And that is what led to, the growth of the movement. And I guess a couple questions then before I can have to let you go. One is, what would you say has been how would you measure the success of the organization fast forwarding now, a little nearly 20 years?
Well, first of all, by the number of economic operators joining the project, we are 1,200 and something, and we reached the number 1,000 already in 2015. But keep in mind, economy is a living thing, so a lot of the original shopkeepers needed to close down, retire. Well, believe me, with a leap of faith, of course, right now, but nobody left the project because they were scared. Nobody left the project because they changed their minds. Cosa Nostra, we know for sure through investigations that prefers not to bother the shops carrying our symbol, which I, by the way, brought with me, so you can see it.
Perfect. There's an X with a broken circle.
Yeah, it's the circle actually represents the society, okay? And the cross is our warning to the mafiosi, this is not a place for you. It's people telling together to the mafia, we stick together, you have no business coming over here. And we know by investigations led by the law enforcement that this is actually working. The fact that they prefer not to bother the shops in our list is because they know that they will be reported. And this leads to investigation, this leads to arrests. And so this is one of the major things.
Well, let me ask you one other thing, because I know that you guys branched out and have for those people who, like myself, have visited Sicily perhaps once and are looking forward to their next trip back, that you guys have a travel bureau or travel agency for ethical travel. And so you can be assured of going and staying with people in places and shopping in places that are part of the No Pizzo, Addiopizzo, kind of movement. So we'll put that in the show notes as well. So listen, last question then, Lyndon, I'm sorry, I would love to talk to you much more, and I hope we can do it again. In fact, I'm hoping that when people hear more of this story, particularly when I ask you this question, that you might be hearing from others. So my question is, we live in a world where many people have suggested that not just what we're seeing from the Trump administration and tariffs this week, but in fact, not just him, but other places around the world, that the tactics of control that you've just described are going to sound very familiar to people who see a similar pattern of what is being attempted, of asserting a type of control, in a fairly grotesque manner. So I'm not asking you to say it's correct, the analogy, but I suppose, are there lessons, do you think, that others can take, whether they are, thinking about how to resist, organized crime control within their community or on this much broader scale? Are there lessons from your movement that other people, might want to be learning from and take on board?
Yes, one specifically that we ourselves learned by other heroes sacrificing their lives during the 20 years of fighting back the violence of Cosa Nostra, and in 2 words, active citizenship. The idea of working, I mean, with all due respect, with uniforms and badges, we need them, okay? But we have to do our part as well. And our part is done by exercising our rights. First of all, the right to education, the right to free speech, the right to protest, the right to civil disobedience. So a couple of names you want to maybe look up is Peppino Impastato, which a man that was killed in 1978, son of a mafia boss that rebelled his whole life against the mafia, but doing things that we may thought at the time were impossible to fight against the mafia. So he did satire, he did politics, he did journalism, he did activism in general. One other is a priest, Father Pino Puglisi, that used education to, and this is a lesson we're learning. We have a project called Educativa di Strada, Education on the Street, where we approach the kids of our neighborhood, which is a difficult one, by the way, trying to break the circle. We realize that very often people falling in the trap, in the illusion of fascination with the mafia, were kids that had no options, that they lived in the reality and they believed this is the only thing they can do. Crossing that line, breaking that circle is a way to let kids to understand they have an entire horizon of options in front of them. So the lesson that I would like the rest of the people to take, just like we took the lesson. So it's not us inventing this formula. It's us applying the formula we learned by other people before us. Is exercise your rights. So in the environment you're in, try to understand what the issue is and try to understand what you can do as a citizen, what you can do with other people. That's the second lesson. Network, it's a key word. For us, the list that it's being created, we call it Rete di Consumo Critico, network of critical consumerism. Network is a keyword. Strong, you alone, you can be strong on your own, but imagine more than one, we are stronger. So the idea is not to fight alone. Do a little bit, but together with other people that do a little bit. That's something that I would like people listening to this podcast will take home.
Well, Linda Vetrano from Addiopizzo. Is that better pronunciation?
Yes, correctly.
Did I do better this time? Okay, good.
Perfectly pronounced.
Thank you so much for coming on the show on Wicked Problems. And we look, please know that we give you all our love and support for your continued work there.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your experiences. I hope that a lot of people will get inspiration from that. Like you said, none of us have a monopoly of wisdom. We want to learn from other people to figure out how can we get out of the situation that we find ourselves in. So thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me and to talk about our organization. Bye.
So if you're looking in the world that we now find ourselves in, some lessons about how to fight a creeping environment of mafia tactics and extortion to control not just the individual parts of the economy, but the whole system. Well, I hope you could learn something from hearing from Linda Vetrano of Addiopizzo, the grassroots anti-mafia movement in Sicily, and some lessons that maybe there are some that could be learned and applied to what's happening now. The alternatives, of course, there is always the Sicilian Vespers option, aka Luigi. But my thanks to Linda Vetrano for coming on, and great to talk to her. Hopefully you got something out of it as well. And we did have to kick some other things to the curb, delay some things to get that conversation. Because we do think it's timely, and I think people might get some good out of it. It means we've pushed back a couple things, like our interview with some folks from SRM 360 talking about solar radiation management and a moratorium that's being discussed. They're having a webinar about next week. So we interview two folks from there, from Harvard and from University of Chicago. Then on Sunday, we're going to release a conversation I'm super excited about with Laura Schmidt, who is the founder-director of the Good Grief Network, which actually helps people to cope with climate stress, which seems another thing worth exploring in these times, who is out with her partner, Amy Lewis Rowe, co-authoring the book, How to Live in a Chaotic Climate, which I think is very timely, so we wanted to bring you that. And they're in Michigan, and but hey, all of our teams are now out of the NCAA tournament, so but I still got to wear the hat. Anyway, have a good weekend and enjoy this musical interlude, which you might have heard at a Addiopizzo rally in Sicily. If you'd attended one in the last couple of years, maybe you should check out their travel agency to see if you can go back and catch the next festival. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Wicked Problems, made possible through the generosity of people like you. If you liked this conversation, please share it and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps people find the show. If you'd like an ad-free version of this podcast, consider becoming a paid subscriber at wickedproblems.earth. You'll also get our newsletter, all our show notes, member-only goodies, and you'll be supporting media that wants to tell the stories at the frontier of climate tech, the place where people and politics, technology and capital meet and shape the future. And whether it's one you'd want to live in. Wicked Problems is written and edited by Richard Delavan. Production assistance was provided by me, Theodore Delavan. Wicked Problems, Climate Tech Conversations, is a production of Wicked Problems Limited. Thanks again for listening.
Stavo arrivando dopo una parata di pausa. Mi pare giusto che sempre per la causa. Pare donare sempre fischi chiudi prima mi fa ballare magari che solleva. Mi fa ballare vecchi da piccini di casa, potro che io cosa che si vedono che capite che si scelgono che si